When it comes to their bespoke electric vehicles, Audi have gained themselves a really positive reputation, starting with the e-tron SUV, which was a large, stylish, comfortable and practical electric vehicle that drove really well, and it was taking on the likes of the Jaguar I-Pace and Mercedes EQC. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have the Audi e-tron GT, which underneath it is, yes, a Porsche Taycan, but with a very different exterior to it, and more of a GT feel to the car rather than a truly sporty saloon car. But you still have tons of performance and character, and it drove absolutely beautifully. But Audi needs an electric vehicle to sell in its thousands, to appeal to a mass market, and especially not cost the earth, because if you're going for an EV, well, that's what you're trying to save. So we have the Q4 e-tron. Now underneath it has the same platform as the Volkswagen ID.4 and 5 and the Skoda Enyaq. So this should really just dominate being an Audi electric vehicle. But we have a problem. You see, I can't believe I'm saying this with electric vehicles, but the electric SUV segment is actually a massive battleground, and there are no lightweights competing in this segment. This has taken on the likes of the Volvo XC40 Recharge, the Genesis GV60, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, Kia EV6, and even from its own stable, the Volkswagen ID.4 and 5 and Skoda Enyaq. So really, I've got to answer two big questions. Firstly, what is the Q4 e-tron like? And secondly, in what is a very competitive segment, how does it stand out? Stick with me to find out. Now, when it comes to the Q4 styling, I think Audi have been very sensible by essentially keeping it nice and safe and simple with the Q4. It hasn't got an aggressive front end to it. It looks very family friendly, and that should appeal to a much wider audience. But it is of course very much an Audi when you see it up front, with the big blocked off grille to let you know it's an EV, and that changes depending on which trim level you go for. But of course, this being an Audi SUV, you can get it in traditional SUV or a Sportback body style. And I have got the Sportback, which gives you that rakish rear end with a little spoiler and quite coupe-ish look to it, which is something I think Audi do very well. But when I look at the Q4, I get hints of the Audi A2 and Q2 in its styling, where they're trying to do something a little bit different, but try and appeal to a new audience or a new customer base, which they should do with the Q4. Now, I will say I love this Giza blue metallic paint job, and I love the fact as well that we do have 20-inch alloy wheels, but we've got quite a chunky sidewall to the tyre. So this should be a nice, comfortable electric SUV. But you let me know what you think of the Q4 styling in the comments section below. But on that note, I think it's now time that we go sit on the inside and see what it's like in there. Sat in the front of the Audi Q4, you are greeted by a very comfortable and stylish interior, which feels very driver-centric and actually feels very much like an Audi in here. Now, because of course this is an SUV, getting in and out of the Q4 is really easy because of the raised seating position. And then once you're sat in the driver's seat, you find that these seats themselves are very comfortable. They do hold a big bear like me in place, but there is plenty of adjustment as well. But surprisingly, it's manual adjustment on this particular car. But you can get the ideal driving position as well, because the steering has both rake and reach adjustment. And then when it comes to interior quality, I'm going to say it's okay in here. I mean, yes, it feels very much like an Audi in places. We have got really nice soft touch plastic here on top of the dash, on top of the doors, and we've got some leatherette trim here on the door panels and on the center armrests. And I do like the leather on these seats as well. But we have got some shiny plastics in here. We've got this metal effect trim here on the dash. We've got piano black plastic here on the center console, which is very easily prone to scratches, fingerprints and smudges. But we have got some nice, which actually feels like proper metal trim here on top of the dash. So there is that nice air of quality there. But it just feels a little bit too shiny and plasticky in other places. But all in all, in terms of the interior quality, I'll just say it's not too bad. It doesn't feel like the Audis of old, but it doesn't feel like it's a complete cheap plastic fest in here. So that's just something to be aware of. Cubby spaces in the Q4 are actually pretty good, and there is a quirky feature in here. Now firstly, the door pockets are of a decent size. You can get a small to medium sized bottle of drink in there, but they're not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around a bit. However, we have got a second door pocket much higher up, which is perfect to have your bottle of drink and just store it in there whilst you're driving. So that is a really awesome feature to see. The only problem is, just like the lower door pocket, it's not lined with any rubber or fabric, so your bottle does rattle around whilst you're driving. So Audi, please, could we look at getting that rubber lined? And then here on the center console, we have got a little bit of storage underneath where we've got two little rubberized pads. One of them would be for your wireless charging, but the other area is really good for perhaps storing your keys or your wallet, and that doesn't make any noise whilst you're driving about. Then just behind there, we have got two cup holders. They are of a decent size and depth, and they've got some very decent plastic grippers on them. And I've experienced everything from cups of coffee to a bottle of Coke, and nothing wants to kind of move and fall out. So they actually feel very secure in there. And then just behind there, we have got your center armrest, which is actually of a very decent size and depth, which is very handy. And the other thing I'll mention is that it is also rubber lined as well. And what I like as well with the center armrest is that you can slide it forward and have the little ratchet so you can perfectly position your arm for a long journey in typical Volkswagen Group fashion. And then finally we have got the glove box, which is lockable, so that is very handy. And it is of an okay size and shape. It's just a shame that, well, we lose about a third of it to possibly a fuse box or something underneath. So it kind of feels a little bit French in its design. Also, again, it's not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around in there. So that's just something to be aware of. But yeah, when it comes to cubby spaces here in the Q4, I am actually really impressed, especially with those second door pockets. That's just a brilliant feature that I'm surprised no one else has come up with. Now, when it comes to physical buttons in the Q4's cabin, you're probably expecting me to say that there are none. However, Audi have learnt from a previous mistake on a couple of models. So we have got a big infotainment screen. It's 11.6 inches. However, not all the functions are controlled via that touchscreen. Just underneath, we've got some physical buttons for the dual zone climate control. And all I got to say is hallelujah, because that is so much easier to operate whilst you're driving than the touchscreen that we had in the big e-tron SUV. I just felt that to be a little bit fiddly, and you had to take your eyes off the road in order to operate it. And then here on this center console, we have got a physical start-stop button, even though the car will actually come to life when you put your foot on the brake. And then we have got this touch-sensitive button here on the right-hand side, which I first saw in the Audi A3. And I think it's a bit of a try-hard button, because I think just a traditional little twizzly knob, perhaps with a little rocker switch on it, would be much simpler and easier to manufacture. And then we have got your physical button there for your drive select. So you're obviously pulling back for drive and forward for reverse. Of course, being an EV, it's an automatic. Then on the steering wheel, we have got a couple of little issues here because, well, the car hasn't started. So all you've got is a couple of black patches here. But if I push on the brake, on the left hand side, we've got your driver mode display buttons there, so you can go through the various menus and views. And then on the right hand side, we have got your media and communication controls, as well as your voice controls. But other than that, we've got your traditional physical buttons to operate the windows. We haven't got the silly rear button that we've seen in the Cupra or in the ID cars from Volkswagen. So that is actually a real nice blessing. But yeah, everything else is just nicely and logically laid out. Just want to work on these steering wheel controls. And then finally, we have got the infotainment system and the digital dashboard display, or virtual cockpit, as it is an Audi. Now, the infotainment system is an 11.6 inch touchscreen, and it is actually a very nice system to use. The graphics are very clear. It's actually pretty responsive as well. And you have got things like Google Maps, Apple CarPlay, wireless CarPlay, and Android Auto. So yeah, that's actually a really nice system to use. Some of the menu icons are actually of a decent size, so they're easy to hit whilst you're driving. The only thing I would mention is, just like the piano black plastic, the screen is very easily prone to smudges and fingerprints, and I'm just looking at it now and thinking, oh, I need like a little personal chamois just to give it a wipe over at the end of every journey. But it is actually a really lovely system to use. And then in front of the steering wheel, we got a 10.1 inch virtual cockpit, and in traditional Audi style, it's a really lovely system. Using the buttons on the left hand side of the steering wheel, we can go through the various menus. We have again got the Google Maps or Google Earth Maps on the screen, and there is a lot of customization there. I definitely think that Audi system is arguably one of the best out there when it comes to the digital dashboard displays. So all in all, being sat here in the front of the Q4, even though this is like a big family orientated SUV and electric vehicle, it does feel very stylish in here. There is a lot of very good perceived quality in here, and the technology is very good as well. It is a very nice place to be. And on that note, I think it's time that we stop looking at the front of the e-tron seats and see what the Q4 is like in the back. Sat in the back of the Q4, it's actually a nice, comfortable and spacious place to be, just like the Audi Q4 and also the Skoda Enyaq. So sharing that same platform, I was not at all surprised to see how spacious it is back here. Now that driver's seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, I've got a really good amount of knee room, and headroom is not too bad either. I do think a couple of 6-footers could sit in the back of the Q4 e-tron Sportback for a short journey, but their head might just be rubbing against the ceiling because of that sloping roofline. I'll also mention getting in and out of the Q4 is still pretty easy. Just be aware though to mind your head getting out because of that sloping roofline once again. Now when it comes to cubby spaces, it's not too bad back here. We got again some decent door pockets, not lined with any fabric, and what I do love as well is that we do have the extra door pockets on the tops of the doors, so I really do like that. We got your aeroplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats, and we've also got your center armrest with a couple of additional cup holders, which is very handy. I'll also mention that we have got a 40-20-40 split in the seats, so you can get the middle seat down if you want to load any longer items through from the boot area. And then when it comes to features, we have got 2 USB-C charging inputs and a 12-volt socket. I do believe that is an optional extra. And we have got some tri-zone climate control in here, so we can adjust the temperature if we're a bit hot or cold. And then actually, considering that we've got dark headlining, it's actually quite spacious and airy in here. I mean, the windows are of a really nice size. Yes, they are tinted, but they do open all the way down. And then we have got an extra window just behind me in the C-pillar. So again, it doesn't mean you feel very dark and cramped back here, which is very good and very handy, especially if you're on a long journey. Now, when it comes to kids, we have got ISOFIX supports on the outer seats and also on the front passenger seat. But what I love is they actually have these little plastic covers which roll back, exposing the ISOFIX bars. So it makes it really easy to affix a child seat back here. So yeah, sat in back of the Q4 e-tron Sportback, it's very spacious, it's very comfortable, yeah, and it's just a nice place to be. Of course, if you just want that tiny bit more headroom, just go for the traditional Q4 and not the Sportback version. And on the note, I think we should leave these rear seats and see what it's like in the boot. Opening the boot on the Q4 Sportback presents you with 535 litres of space, which is actually very impressive for this segment of car. It does beat the likes of the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and loses out to the Skoda Enyaq, which isn't really surprising. But once you've got the boot open, you find you're greeted with a nice wide square load area, so you can easily get a couple of suitcases or a few weekend bags in there. And what I like as well is that there's virtually no load lip, and there's a nice little scuff area there as well, so you're not going to hit the paint as you're loading or unloading any large bulky items. And it's not devoid of features either. We have got some sturdy tethering hooks and a couple of shopping hooks as well, but surprisingly, no 12-volt socket. But we have got a bit of underfloor storage, which is very handy, and you can actually lower the boot floor if need be, if you want to get a few extra items in. Also, what I like as well is that the parcel shelf does also fit underneath the boot floor, and we've got a couple of little extra cubby spaces on the edge of the boot floor as well, and you can remove the walls to kind of get any wide loads into the boot of your Q4. And if you do put the rear seats down, you don't have a completely flat load area. There is a little bit of a slope, but it is still very handy if you need to carry any large bulky items. Now, the disappointing thing I will say is that we have no frunk on the Q4 Sportback, and that is, I personally think, quite disappointing considering this is a bespoke EV. Also, that means that really if you want to use the variable boot floor, you have to remove the cables, and really the underfloor storage is where you want to keep your cables there. But other than that, no, it's a very practical and yeah, very spacious family EV SUV from Audi. I am actually really impressed with the practicality of the Q4, especially in Sportback body design. And surprisingly, with the Sportback, you get an extra 15 litres of space compared to the traditional SUV, where you only get 520 litres. So yeah, if you really want to make sure you get the full capacity, go for the Sportback version. And you know what? I think on that note, it's time to us to close down this boot and take the Q4 for a drive and see what it's like. So once you start driving the Q4, first impressions are really positive. Now, one thing I like is it does come with that kind of electric vehicle convenience technology, where essentially you get into the car and it starts up for you. And then you just put your foot on the brake and everything comes to life. So you just select a gear and away you go. Same happens for when you leave the Q4. You just get out of the driver's seat, and as soon as you're out of it, the car switches off. So I do like that feature, but surprisingly we still have the start stop button like I experienced with the Cupra Born, and also I actually have to use the key fob in order to unlock the car. So that was something that was a bit surprising. But when you get going, that you find that the Q4 is a nice, comfortable electric vehicle, and because it is an SUV, I've got a really good view of the road ahead because of that raised seating position. The A-pillar is quite thick, but the way it's been raked, it actually means you don't really get much of an obstruction at any kind of junction, so I do like that. The wing mirrors are of a really decent size and shape, and I have got blind spot monitoring on this particular car, and if I look over my shoulder, I actually find that the C-pillars are not as thick as I was expecting them to be, and rear visibility is really good as well. That although this is the Sportback and you do get this little divide, kind of like an old Honda Civic in the rear, you've got an okay rear view. But if you want a better view, then I'd recommend going for just the regular Q4. Also, something I like is that the rear headrests don't obstruct your view at the rear as well, so I do like that. But yeah, once you get going, first impressions of the Q4 are really positive. It is a very nice, comfortable, relaxing electric SUV. Perfect for the family. Now, when it comes to trim levels, there are 3 to choose from in the Q4 range. There is the entry-level Sport, the mid-range S-Line, which is what I've got here, and the top-of-the-range Black Edition. However, there did used to be a four-sprung, so don't be surprised if that trim level makes a return. But personally, I'd recommend going for the S-Line. I mean, it tends to be the most popular trim level when it comes to Audi vehicles, and you get everything that you would really want in terms of standard kit. Of course, in typical Audi fashion, you can add technology packs and comfort packs, etc. to your car. And if you want to know what this particular car's got, please check in the description below, because I know I have got the technology packs. I've got things like the head-up display. So yeah, I do recommend going for the S-Line, but if you also want to save a bit more money, go for the regular Q4. Don't go for the Sportback, because surprisingly, even though you get kind of a little bit less in terms of car, it's actually a little bit more expensive. So that's just something to be aware of there. But yeah, happily go for the S-Line and enjoy all the nice standard kit you'll get with it. Now when it comes to powering the Q4, there's only one battery available, but two power outputs. So the battery is an 82 kilowatt hour battery. Now with the 40, you get a single motor, two-wheel drive, and around 201 brake horsepower. And 0 to 62 takes around 8.5 seconds. You can then move up to the more powerful 50, which gives you two motors and all-wheel drive, or Audi's Quattro all-wheel drive system, and that also ups the power to around 295 brake horsepower, and that gives you a 0 to 62 time of around 6.2 seconds. So it is pretty quick. However, yes, compared to some of its rivals, it does feel like it's a little bit lagging behind. But personally, I think this is the perfect amount of power for the car. I've got enough power to overtake, I've got enough power to kind of shoot off from the lights, or from a junction. So yeah, it's just perfect for this size and this type of vehicle. Sometimes you don't need that performance where it just kind of pulls you into the driver's seat and you end up scaring your passengers in the car. So as a result, this feels like Audi's actually thought about it. They've thought about the performance that was needed for the Q4, and it has got the right amount of performance. So yeah, when it comes to the power side, yeah, sure, it's lagging behind some of its rivals, but I don't think that really matters. Now, when it comes to charging the Q4, this is where it lags a little bit behind some of its key rivals, particularly those from Hyundai Group. So the maximum charging you can do with a DC charger is around 135 kilowatts, which means it'll take around about 36 minutes to go from 5 to 80%. So yes, that is around about double what you'd expect from the Hyundai Group with their 800 volt charging. But the one thing I do like about the Q4 is I found that when it hit 80%, it didn't slow down rapidly, which is something you see with a lot of other cars. It kind of had this nice kind of linear charging curve to it. So that's just something to be aware of in the Q4, especially, as I said, compared to its Hyundai Group rivals. Now, when it comes to the brake regen in the Q4, it's actually not too bad. Now, you can set the gear selector into B mode, so essentially every time you take your foot off the accelerator pedal, it starts slowing down. And it is pretty strong, but I wouldn't call it proper one-pedal driving that you can experience with some of its rivals. However, you can put it into an intelligent setup that Audi have on the Q4, where it actually works in conjunction with the sat-nav and the sensors at the front of the car, and you have something called Audi Pre-Sense. Now what this does is, as you're approaching, say, a junction, or perhaps there's a car in front of you, or actually even more intelligently than that, you're actually going from, say, a 60 mile an hour limit to a 40 mile an hour limit, you get a little icon come up on the head-up display or on the digital dash, and it will tell you to take your foot off the accelerator pedal, and the car just starts slowing down for you. But it doesn't go to a complete stop. So if I'm going from a 60 mile an hour to a 40 mile an hour zone, you just take your foot off the pedal and it just slows down to 40 and then carries on. There was even a point where I went to a 30 mile an hour zone and it actually slowed down once again. So it's actually a really nice intelligent system, but it does take a little getting used to if you've not experienced it before. And I do like the fact that, with the radar guided cruise control, it feels like a nice whole package to have with the car. I actually had the Pre-Sense system with the e-tron last year, which only had regular cruise control, and that just kind of boggled my mind a little bit. So when it comes to the regen, yes, you don't get full one pedal driving, but it is actually a nice intelligent system when you use the Audi Pre-Sense. Now when it comes to the drive modes, of course we got your traditional Audi ones. We have got Comfort, Efficiency, Auto, we've got Dynamic or Sport, and Individual. However, there is actually a secret sixth drive mode, which is called Range Mode. Now you have to actually find that by going into the infotainment system, not via the Drive Select button. And what that does is it really takes huge chunks of power away from you, so you can get the maximum possible range out of the Q4. So what it does is it puts the climate control into eco mode, so it kind of feels like, yeah, you got an asthmatic blowing at you via a straw. It also limits your top speed to 56 miles per hour. So if you're on the national speed limit road, yeah, you're going to have people wanting to overtake you. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because when it comes to efficiency, with the Q4, Audi say I should get around 3.4 miles per kilowatt hour, but I've actually managed to achieve 3.6 miles per kilowatt hour on a regular long journey, and that was just in efficiency mode. But I did have it in range mode, and I did drive a bit like Miss Daisy's grandmother, but I managed to get 3.8 miles per kilowatt hour, and I'm actually really impressed by that. Now granted, I had to get kind of stuck in the bank holiday weekend traffic, but it was still a really nice relaxing drive, and I didn't feel like I was holding anyone up, particularly on the types of roads I was driving on. So I was really impressed with that 3.8, but you do have to sacrifice a big chunk of the air conditioning and your top speed, so just something to be aware of there. So when it comes to the Q4's ride and refinement, for the most part, I've actually been really impressed by it. It is a very comfortable electric SUV and is perfect for the family. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we got big 20-inch alloy wheels with a chunky tyre on them. However, it's not as smooth and as comfortable as I thought it would be. In fact, there's a little bit of a stiffness to the suspension, and that's probably due to the fact that I've got the S-line trim. But it does mean at low speeds you can feel a lot of the bumps and undulations on the road kind of come up into the cabin, and if you go over something like a manhole cover or a pothole, you can sometimes get a bit of a jolt coming into the cabin. But the nice thing is that actually at higher speeds the Q4 does settle down and becomes a really nice relaxing cruiser. But I would say something like the Ioniq 5, particularly in premium trim, does feel a bit more comfortable when it comes to the suspension setup. Now granted, that car did have a little bit of body float going over a humpback bridge or a level crossing, but I know Hyundai are looking to sort that out with the 2023 model year. But yeah, in terms of just everyday driving, you will find it's actually really comfortable, but some of those potholes and manhole covers and that, and just that little bit of bumpiness from the road does come into the cabin. Now also, when it comes to refinement, for the most part it is actually a nice refined EV, but there are a couple of intrusions into the cabin. Now firstly, wind noise at speed, you can hear a little bit coming off the wind mirrors, but tyre roar is the big intrusion into the cabin. Now the good news is that we got a Sonos sound system in here, which is the first time I've actually come across that brand in a car, but it is actually a really lovely sound system, and it does mean you get to kind of enjoy your music and not hear that tyre roar or wind noise coming off the wing mirror. But on a poor UK road, yeah, you do get that highlight of tyre roar coming into the cabin, as you can hear there, and it does take a little bit of that refinement away, which is a bit disappointing. But again, for everyday driving, you really shouldn't have too many issues. But yeah, for the most part, ride and refinement I am impressed with. I would just like it to be a little bit quieter in here and a little bit softer in the suspension. So what about the Q4's handling? Well, I've got it in comfort mode. We're going around a corner, and it seems to actually hold on pretty well. Very little in terms of roll or lean, even in comfort mode. And yes, you can hear some of the items in the cabin moving around a bit, but because I've got that Quattro all-wheel drive system, I have got the security of knowing that all four wheels are holding on for me. Now, I wouldn't say it was a particularly fun car, because you got that high seating position, and even though the batteries are low down, it doesn't feel like it's been designed to be a truly fun and rewarding drive. But it's nice to know you've got that kind of confidence there to chuck it into a corner, particularly with the 50 and the Quattro system, and it will hold you in place. And then if you do decide you want to put it into dynamic or sport mode, the first thing you find is, yes, the suspension firms up. There's actually a nice amount of feel coming from the steering. I mean, yes, you don't feel fully connected to the front tyres, but it is very responsive and reactive, and as a result, it does feel quite agile. But again, it just doesn't feel like a truly fun car to chuck around in the corners. Something like the e-tron GT will definitely tick that box for you. However, yeah, you're looking at paying twice what you'd have to pay for this. Well, this particular car, I'd say, because it's over £60,000. So yeah, when it comes to everyday driving, you'll have no issues whatsoever. It's actually got a nice feel from the steering wheel. The steering wheel itself feels really nice in my hands. And yeah, for a family SUV, you'll have no issues whatsoever. So when it comes to the ride, the refinement and the handling, as an overall package, it is actually really good. But some rivals do things a little bit better, particularly in terms of ride. But the handling, yeah, I have no issues with it. It's just not the most fun car out there. Now, something I have mentioned, of course, is that, you know, when it comes to the drive and getting going, it's actually really good. But what about stopping? And that is a little bit of a negative on the Q4, because the brake pedal feel, I don't really feel connected to the brakes. There's a little bit of sponginess. You've got to push quite far in order to get, you know, some good bite, especially if you're going to have an emergency stop. So it is something to get used to, and it is something that we all are having to get used to with brands producing electric vehicles, because yeah, it's not hydraulic, it's going to be an electrical system, and it's, yeah, there's a little bit of a sponginess there which I wasn't expecting. So that's just something to be aware of with the Q4's braking. It's just that the feel just needs a little bit of work on it. So what are my thoughts on the Audi e-tron Q4 Sportback? Well, as I said earlier, Audi have definitely had their thinking caps on for this car, because they need it to appeal to a much wider audience than the e-tron and the GT. And I think they've done a brilliant job of it. I mean, yes, it looks like an Audi, but it's very inoffensive. They weren't going over the top with its design. And then you've got the fact that it is comfortable, it's practical, it's spacious in the boot, and using that MEB platform, which the Enyaq and the ID4 and 5 have been used on, well, was essentially a no-brainer from Audi. The range is decent and the drive is very decent as well. However, I would like to see improvements with the ride quality and the refinement. Also, the charging credentials as well with the Q4 do need to be upped a bit to compete with some of its rivals. And that's actually the big thing. As an electric vehicle on its own, the Q4, I think, is very good. But there's two things. Number one, would I have this over an ID5 and an Enyaq Coupe? Yes. Would I have this over an Ioniq 5 or maybe a Kia EV6? No. I think in this segment, Hyundai Group they're just king of the segment right now. They have got it absolutely spot on with the quirky styling, the excellent charging capabilities, plenty of space, and they drive beautifully as well. But I'm not saying that the Q4 is a bad car. It's not. It's a very good electric vehicle. But against those cars from Hyundai Group, it just falls a little bit short. But I think for a lot of people, they're not going to bother. They're not going to care about what I'm saying. They got themselves an Audi EV, which is very comfortable and actually a decent drive as well. So, and the fact is, I've seen plenty of Q4s on the road, so I knew this is going to be a very good electric vehicle and a very popular one amongst customers. So yeah, ultimately the Q4 e-tron is a very good electric car. It is brilliant in a number of areas, but just falls short in a couple of others. And as a result, it is a very good EV, but I don't personally think it's best in class. But it is definitely in the top 5, I'd say. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Audi e-tron Q4 Sportback. Of course, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. Of course, if you've got any questions about the e-tron Q4 and my time with it, please put them down in the comments section below. And as always, I'm on social media, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So don't forget to follow there as well. But yeah, the Audi Q4 e-tron is a very good electric vehicle and I really have enjoyed my time with it. So yeah, definitely go take a test drive if you fancy one. But in the meantime, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful day and I'll catch you all in the next video. So take care, everybody, and bye-bye.